Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reid, and ladies and gentlemen, do you realize it's been 25 years since the release of the original, the very first, The Fast and the Furious? 25 years. I remember going to the theater and seeing this movie. I thought it was a little throwaway action movie with cars and racing and all that good stuff in the summer of 2001. It was a very interesting movie. And never, never would I have thought that it would become a global phenomenon like it is. Not in particular this film, but the entire franchise. This film, just this little old film, directed by Rob Cohen, and one of the writers was a very young David Ayer. Yes, who gave us Training Day and End of Watch and Suicide Squad, Fury, and all that. He wrote this. I think this was one of his first films that he wrote or contribute to writing. I think they had 3 writers here. But this little film spawned not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 9 sequels with another one in the works. And it's also a spin-off film with Hobbs and Shaw, a TV series that is currently in development, as well as several video games. This is a phenomenon. It's grossed billions of dollars. This franchise, billions, and it's no sign of stopping. It's no sign of stopping the Fast and the Furious. I mean, it turned into a superhero franchise. It really did. These films, every single film, always outdoes the other one. Okay, what can we do different? Let's jump off a mountain and swing a car like Tarzan. Let's go into space. Let's outrun a 747 jet. Let's pull it down from the sky. Let's sink a submarine with these cars. They done so much with this franchise. The most ridiculous, other ridiculous stuff that you will ever see on a TV or movie screen. It is, in any other world, it would be the stupidest thing you ever saw. Just dumb. But for some unknown reason, this franchise keeps people coming. I feel that this movie, after Fast 5, I was pretty much out as far as looking for substance. It was over because 5 was great. 5 was probably the best one in my eyes. And then after that, it just went completely ridiculous. But every time they drop one, I'm there. There's something about it that keeps me coming back. And millions of others, because every movie is a success. Every movie is a box office smash. But before we got to all of that, before we were going into outer space with a Nissan Altima, before we were jumping off of mountains, before they were catapulting themselves from one building to the next and going back to the other building and going back to the other. Before we got to that ridiculousness of pulling a safe through the streets of Brazil with 2 cars, there was The Fast and the Furious that came out in 2001. Like I said, I think it was me and my cousin that went to go see this movie, and we were like, man, this is pretty good, a little popcorn summer movie, I was all for it, to see cars, to see the hot women, to see a little undercover cop story. It was fun for what it was. It was truly a good time for 2001. In case you've been living under the rock, not the rock, he comes into this franchise much later, but in case you were wondering what this film was about, it's about an undercover cop named Brian O'Connell, who was played by the late Paul Walker, and he infiltrates this street racing crew to investigate a series of hijacks, and he finds himself developing a kind of a complex friendship with the leader of this group, Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel. Starring alongside of these two actors, you also had Michelle Rodriguez as well as Georgiana Brewster. Where the film comes from, it all spawned from this article that was written in, I think, 1998. And the article was entitled Racer X, and it detailed about street racing in New York City, nonetheless. But it was illegal street racing, and it was pretty prominent around that time in the late 90s. And so this article was written, became pretty popular, and it fell into Hollywood producers' hands, and they wanted to make a movie about it. And so what did the Hollywood producers do? They moved the setting from New York City to LA. Of course. And the rest is history. This was, I wasn't into cars like that. I wasn't a car guy. You know, I acknowledged them for what they were. I'm more of a classic car guy, a muscle car guy. And so these street racing cars, you know, souped up with NOS and all this other stuff, I didn't know. I wasn't into that. It once this movie came out, I really started paying attention to it. And I used to see these cars on the road more often after the release of this film. It became more prominent, you know, or I paid attention more. One of the two, but it was something that was in my preview after this film was released. Before we get to the review of it, I wanted to run down some facts about the Fast and the Furious that came out in 2001 that maybe you didn't know, you know. Maybe you didn't know. It might find hard to believe in some cases. So, for instance, Michelle Rodriguez and Georgiana Brewster didn't have a driver's license when they made this movie. They didn't have a driver's license or a learner's permit. They had no experience driving cars until the production of this movie. It's crazy to think that, but that's the truth. Speaking of Michelle Rodriguez, her and Vin Diesel, they were dating at the time of this film. They played a couple on screen as well as off screen. They end up breaking up, of course, but which probably led to her not being in the following sequels until, when did she return? In 4, 5? I don't even remember. There's so many now. But yeah, she was killed off and yeah, didn't return for a while after they broke up. Is it linked? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but I just found it kind of funny. The filmmakers, they had asked the owners of the house in the background where they were shooting at to paint their houses in muted colors. The reason they wanted them to paint their houses in muted colors, that way the cars can stand out. You know, the colorful cars that they had on set. And the people complied. Ain't that something? I'll say this much. I'm not painting my house. If they filming something on my block, they can paint it, but they're gonna have to paint it back to what it was before. And I still want my money as well. During the street races, real life drivers, they brought their cars to participate in the scene, and so that to give it, I guess, a more authentic feel. During filming, you actually had real authentic street race drivers out there, you know, in the scene when Brian, the first racing scene with Brian and Dom and was it Ja Rule? And yeah, they The other participant was a actual street racer. He's a champion, as it is, if you want to call it that, in a illegal street racing. But he was a champion at the time for that scene. But all the cars that participated, all the cars that came on the set, there were over 1,500 cars that, that were in that race war scene. That is a lot. 1,500 cars for that scene. The first race scene was supposed to be a quarter of a mile. That's the race. That's normally what the race is, a quarter of a mile, and that takes about 10 seconds in reality. Well, that wouldn't translate well on the screen, in the film. It's a 10-second race. So for the film, they stretched it out for a 2-minute scene. Like it wasn't a quarter of a mile. It actually felt like 10 miles that they were racing. But in the film, with them stretching it out, the cars essentially went 150 miles per hour. And to go that fast in a quarter of a mile is virtually impossible. It can be done. They have vehicles that could do that, but not too often. So that's where it kind of bends reality. Speaking of bending reality, Dominic Toretto in the first film was 24 years old, whereas Vin Diesel at the time was 34 years old, playing a 24-year-old on screen. That isn't out of the norm. They do that in movies all the time, but I found that funny. And I must say, I never thought he was 24 years old. At no point did I think Dominic Toretto was 24 years old in that movie. But that's the lie they tell me. I mean, come on. Vin Diesel never looked 24 years old. He never. And his counterpart, played by Paul Walker, he wasn't the first choice. Paul Walker wasn't the first choice to play Brian. It was actually three people they considered for the role: Mark Wahlberg, Christian Bale, and Slim Shady himself, Eminem. They all turned it down, of course, but I think I would have been. I love Paul Walker in the role. He is that role. He is Brian, God rest his soul. But I would have been curious to see Eminem in this role. He only did that one movie, which he virtually played himself. But I would have loved to see Eminem in more movies, because he's clearly talented and he can act. He actually did a good job in 8 Mile. I want to. This would have been a little different, but it didn't come to be. But we got the best thing. The best man did win in this regard. Paul Walker cast as Brian. Speaking of more consideration, more actresses or actors for different roles. Early on, the role of Mia Toretto, Dom's sister, was originally written. It was written specifically for Alicia Dushku, but she turned it down. And so they had held auditions. And this is who auditioned for the role of Mia. And I stress audition because they wanted the role. Crazy enough. Natalie Portman, Sarah Michelle Gellar, yes, Buffy, Kristen Dunst, Jessica Biel, they all auditioned for the role. But ultimately, Jordana Brewster won the role of Mia. And looking in hindsight, that probably was best. That's probably for the best, because all of those actresses went on to have storied careers. It wasn't like that hurt them in the least bit. But it's just weird that they because they were known around that time. It wasn't like these were unknown actresses at that time. Struggling young actresses trying to make it. No, they were established, and they didn't get that role. before the film was called The Fast and the Furious, it went through a few working titles. It went through Racer X, Red Line, Race Wars, and ultimately they settled on The Fast and the Furious. I, th- this goes to show you that the title of a film is crucial because I don't see too many sequels, off of Racer X. It's so many iterations of the Fast and the Furious that they have made. Fate of the Furious, Fast and Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious. All of this and Fast X and all that. It's so it wouldn't mesh with these other titles, so it all worked out in the long run. But I don't think they were like looking that far ahead when they came up with that decision. But it's crazy how a title of a film makes all the difference in the world. Um, Speaking of, I brought up earlier about other actors being considered and for certain roles, and Paul Walker not being the first choice for Brian. Well, believe it or not, Vin Diesel wasn't the first choice for Dom. The first choice was Timothy Olyphant, and he turned it down. And he had a pretty legitimate reason for turning it down. He had just a year prior, just did Gone in 60 Seconds with Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie and all them. And he didn't want to be linked up with another car related movie back to back. So he turned the role down. I'm gonna say this. Number one, look, I love Vin Diesel. I'm not hating on Vin Diesel, but when it comes to better, I gotta lean towards Timothy Olyphant. Timothy Olyphant elevates things to me. He elevates whatever he's in. I Justified is one of my favorite shows to come out over the last 30 years. I can't even remember when Justified came out on FX, but it was phenomenal, and he was phenomenal on that show. Santa Clara Diet with Drew Barrymore that was on Netflix. I think it ran for like maybe 3 seasons. No, 2 seasons. It was really good, and he was really good on it. Showing his comedic side and everything. It's just I can go on and on about Timothy Olyphant. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of him. I love his performances. Not all his movies, but I don't blame him for that. He's really good. He was good in that Die Hard movie where he was the villain, even though that Die Hard movie wasn't that good, but he was good in it. Being opposite of Bruce Willis, and so it would have been cool to see him as Dom. And if the franchise would have continued the way it did with Timothy Olyphant, I don't know. I don't know, because Vin Diesel was the spearhead. He was the one leading the charge for all of these movies. He later became a producer of all of these films. So he's the reason why we're still getting all of these Fast and Furious movies. And, for the fans of this franchise, I'm pretty sure everybody is super happy that Vin Diesel got the role. And I'm not mad that he got the role. I just would have loved to see Timothy Olyphant in that role. What he would have did with it. But that's just a personal preference. It's a personal preference. Here's another iteration of the cast that could have happened. And this is a fact. Like I said to start this off, you can believe it or not, but this is a fact. Rob Cohen, who directed this film, his original choices for the cast was Mario Lopez, Mark Paul Gallagher, or Gallister, I could never get his name right, but and Dustin Diamond. If those names sound familiar, that is the cast from Saved by the Bell. But that was his initial choice. Mario was going to be Dom, Mark was going to be Brian, and Dustin Diamond, yes, Skeeter, he was going to be Jesse, the role of Jesse. But the studio said no. We're not gonna this people gonna think this is a continuation of Saved by the Bell. So the studio X'd it, and the rest is history. But that was the initial vision of Rob Cohen for the Fast and the Furious. Interesting. This movie, once again, believe it or not, was envisioned as a sequel to the 1991 film Point Break. And if you ever seen Point Break with Keanu Reeves and the late great Patrick Swayze, similar concept. It's basically the same movie, and I can see where this could have been a sequel to that. But instead of having Johnny Utah, we had Brian O'Connell, and the rest is history. But this is kind of a spiritual sequel, I guess you could say, to Point Break, which is pretty much a classic in a lot of people's eyes. Going back to the role of Dominic Toretto, the studio at one point was trying to get Colin Farrell in the role of Dominic. Colin Farrell is an amazing actor. Amazing actor. I'm going to sit here and tell you that wouldn't have worked. That wouldn't have worked. Not to say he wouldn't have did a good job. Not to say the movie wouldn't have been good with him. But I don't think it would have worked like this. In this, I don't know, version of the movie that we saw. I think it would have been a different movie with Colin Farrell. But that's just my thoughts. But those are some of my little tidbits about the film. So let's get into the review of the one that started it all, the one that spearhead global phenomenon, box office giant franchise that financially rivals Marvel Studios, the MCU, DCU, whatever cinematic universe that there is. The Fast and the Furious franchise is neck and neck with them all, financially. I'm not saying quality, but financially, it's up there with the Avengers films and all that. So that is crazy. And it all started with this film in 2001. I love this movie. This movie, what I love about the Fast and the Furious is the fact that it's simple. It is a simple linear story. An undercover cop, played by Paul Walker, he infiltrates this gang or this street racing team, crew, whatever, who hijacks oil trucks or gas trucks, whatever. It's like a Western in a lot of ways. The way it does, the story structure is. And it's led by Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, this leader. And this is what separates this film from the rest of the movies. This is true acting and storytelling and character development and all that. A real movie, a real structured film, which makes it perfect. Now, it's not a perfect movie. I'm talking perfection in the standards of Fast and Furious movies. It's nowhere near Citizen Kane here. I'm just saying how the story is told with Dominic Toretto being this leader, being this gang member, and he's doing this for family, which has become a motif throughout the entire franchise. And how Brian infiltrates this crew, and instead of coming after them, just similar to Johnny Utah in Point Break, with Keanu Reeves, how he grew this relationship with Patrick Swayze and the crew that was robbing the banks and all this here. It's very similar. It's not done as well as it's done in Point Break, but I do appreciate the effort that was put in and the way the characters grow into loving and caring for one another. You know, the romance between uh Brian and Mia, it, it's earned. It's believable. The friendship, the brotherhood that we know and love now between Brian and Dom, it was earned. You know, you respected it. The moment at the end when Brian lets Dom drive off, earned moment, very earned. You know, I thought this film really took the core of these characters, the essence of these characters, and made the best film they can actually make, as opposed to the films to follow. Whereas it didn't matter, you know, it was all about exciting action sequences and stunts and just ridiculousness and all this other stuff, which has its place. Don't get me wrong. I did enjoy those movies. I do enjoy those movies for what they are. Like I said, Fast Five is my favorite out of all of them as far as entertaining and acting and story. You know, I thought it was super well made. But this was such a smaller film and so focused on the character building. It just gives you a greater appreciation. You know, it is not your standard early 2000s action film where, you know, stuff just happened. You know, it really wasn't much character development or story elements to go by. It was more shooty, punchy, blowy up, and that was those were the movies, and you know, you enjoyed it for what it was. You know, I don't hold nothing against them at the time. That's just what the trope was. But this movie really, it really felt like an old school Western at times. It felt like a heist film at times. It felt like a race car film at times. You know, you can blend it with like Donnie Brasco, Days of Thunder, and what's the other one I will compare it? Well, Point Break, I guess you could say. You can put all that together and you get the Fast and the Furious. As far as the actors, I stated before, Paul Walker, this was the role he was born to play, and he played it until, unfortunately, his untimely passing. He is Brian O'Connell. I mean, he is so great in this role. You know, as much as we all love and miss him, let's be honest, he was limited. he wasn't I never saw him if he had not perished in that car crash, ironically, but if he wouldn't have passed away, I never saw him as being in a potential Academy Award winner down the line. Could it have happened? Sure, but I just didn't foresee it because he just was limited in roles outside of this franchise. But this role, he just embodied it. You know, it just felt like him. He felt so comfortable in this role. For instance, if you want to put his performances side by side, let's look at the Fast and the Furious and that time travel movie he did with Richard Donner and Gerard Butler. I can't remember the name of it right now. I am blanking. But anyways, he looked so bored in that movie. He just looked like he didn't want to be there. In another film he did, Brick Mansions, which was like this action parkour movie. It was not good, and he wasn't good in it. You know, he just didn't look comfortable in the roles. You know, this is the only franchise or film I can actually say he just looked comfortable. He looked at home. You know, and he had great chemistry with everybody on screen. Him and Vin Diesel had great chemistry. Down the line, him and Tyrese Gibson had amazing chemistry. They ended up being best friends after that. They were legit friends. You know, it wasn't just for the movie. They were legit friends. And I felt that was awesome, but he just felt at home, and it radiated on the screen. Vin Diesel, this is his franchise. What more can I say? It's fair to say that he's limited as well. And we all love Vin Diesel, but he's limited. So him in this franchise, him in this role, why else you think he's constantly pushing for this franchise to keep going? Because he's limited, and God bless him. He found his niche. This is it. This is it. And he is rolling in it. I did like him. I did like him in Triple X, the first one, ironically, which was directed by the director of this film, Rob Cohen. But aside from that, he wasn't all that. Even in the Riddick films, Pitch Black and all that, Chronicles of Riddick, I didn't care for his performance. I like those movies, but it wasn't because of his performances. But he is Dom, you know. Michelle Rodriguez, she is Letty. They are literally typecast in my mind because all of these actors fit their roles perfectly. This movie was perfectly cast. The direction here was awesome. I thought Rob Cohen was in his bag in this film. The race sequences were exciting. They were adrenaline filled. The heist scenes with the cars driving underneath the tanker trucks and all that was just phenomenal. The stunt work and all that, I thought it was shot well as well. Really cool, really cool. That's where I feel Rob Cohen was kind of pulling from the Western genre from back in the day. It just felt like a train heist from a Western. And I really enjoyed that element of the film. This was the best written film in the franchise. And I'm not saying that because David Ayers wrote it, because I felt that way before I found out David Ayers wrote it. It was a couple of years after this movie came out. I think it probably was around when not Training Day. It was another movie that he did, and they said that he wrote The Fast and the Furious as well. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And that's when I kind of jumped on the David Ayer train. His writing, I love his movies. I love how he writes, because it feels grounded and real and gritty and urban. And he really captured that in every movie that he writes. And he captured that in this film, because this could have easily came off as a whitewashed version of the article that was written in Vibe magazine back in the day. But he twisted it up and gave it some urban flair, and it just related to everyone in that generation, in my generation, and that's why this franchise took off the way it did. It was because of that first film. If the first film don't work, we're not here. We're not talking about the 25-year anniversary. We're not talking about 9 films or 10 films in total, or in a TV show, in the video games, and probably comic books. I don't know. It's just a big media storm of Fast and Furious propaganda here. But I think the writing is what makes this film tick. The acting and the direction and the action sequences were all good, but that's what set this film apart from any other action film that came out around that era, and to be quite frank, the rest of this franchise. And so kudos to David Ayer for that. As far as my knocks on the movie, I mean, it's your typical knocks that I have about it. Some of the action sequences are unbelievable. It's not as egregious as the films to follow this, but it is some unbelievable stuff that takes place in this movie that you're like, really? it's like, no, that's impossible. One being the quarter mile race. I think that's the biggest standout. I noticed that the first time I watched it because it bothered me. It really bugged me when I was sitting in that theater. I'm like, this isn't a quarter mile. They are going, this got to be at minimum 2 miles that they're racing. And they made it feel like, or try to pass it off as a quarter mile race, with all of that going on. And I just couldn't logically let that make sense. It just throw that away or look the other way, or suspend disbelief. That really bothered me. And it still bothers me to this day, unfortunately. But, aside from all that, I loved The Fast and the Furious. I think it is a phenomenal early 2000s action film that is more than an action film. It actually has a deeper story, and it really does tell that family element that is kind of a running joke now throughout the franchise, but you really felt it in this movie with Dom and what he's doing to ensure that his family is taken care of and all this here. I commend all the filmmakers on The Fast and the Furious. The Fast and the Furious 25 years. In commemoration of the 25-year anniversary, depending on when you listen to this episode, I think they're re-releasing it in theaters on August 21st, and that's like a week from when I'm recording this. That's a week away, but it by the time I drop this, it'll probably be a couple of days from now. But I'm strongly considering going to the theater and watch it again, just to see it in the theater again. Because I had a good time. I do remember that. I remember having a good time watching it in the theater back in 2001. But yeah, 25 years, man. 25 years. The Fast and the Furious gets a letter grade of a B plus. Awesome movie, which spawned an awesome franchise and made a lot of people awesomely rich. Oh man, never would have thought, never in a million years, that we would get 10 movies from this. Never. And we can get, it's just amazing what we get multiple sequels to. And movies that you thought would spawn a lot of sequels don't. They don't. And honestly, not every movie needs to have sequels. I never saw this movie having a sequel. I didn't feel the need to have a sequel to The Fast and Furious. I thought that it was wrapped up nice and neat with a shiny little bow on it. But hey, they definitely proved me wrong. But yeah, man, kudos, man. 25 years and still going strong. I would like to know which one was your favorite Fast and Furious film. Like I said, mine was Fast 5. I think that was a combination of all the good elements from this entire franchise put in one film. You can make an argument for this one. You can make an argument for, I don't think anybody talks about Tokyo Drift, and for good reason, but it's whichever one you think is the best out of them all, let me know. Subscribe to the KBRadioNetwork.com website, where you can be notified of new episodes dropping, and you can listen to previous episodes here on the network. Don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video while you're there. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this look back at the 25-year anniversary of The Fast and the Furious. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.